want to think about pioneer ministry within the structures of the Church of Ireland, and some people here are incredibly well versed in the structures of the Church of Ireland. You know how they work, they know how to knit together, you know where you fit within them, you know how parishes and dioceses fit within them, and you can see and begin to locate how pioneer ministry might work. Others, in fact, probably quite a lot of people, have been living within the Church of Ireland, ministering within the Church of Ireland, working within the Church of Ireland for a very, very long time. And to be honest with you, you're going to describe what the structures are, and you go, oh, I never knew that. That's the air that we breathe, that's the space we operate in. It's just the environment that we inhabit, often without realizing it. And that environment provides real good safeguards and strengths for us. But it also places boundaries on us as to what is possible and how pioneer ministry might begin to navigate within that. And some of you are here and you're thinking, I have not got one baldy clue what you're talking about. Church structures, I haven't a clue. But you want to do something pioneering, and you want to make an impact, and you want to reach people, and you want to start something, and you want to get money for it, and you need maybe a building, and you want to know what you're allowed to do in ministry. And somehow you need to know how to navigate within this space in order to do that well, in a way that you can actually grow your ministry, in a way that you can safeguard your ministry and the people that you are actually ministering unto, but also in a way in which you can bring new questions into the room. How do we actually transform these structures in a way that's going to help us reach those with little or no connection to church in ways that quite possibly look different than what we have done before? So that's our hope in the short window of time that we have here. For pioneer ministry, we've had this image of a trellis and a vine, a gardening metaphor, where we're trying to grow something. And it's not really new, because the church, as you'll see, has always been planting and doing new things. But pioneer ministry is the latest iteration of something, seeking to do something new in our time. But something new has to have life and has to be life-giving. And this image of the trellis and the vine is the way that we have sought to try and shape how we're organizing pioneer ministry and seeking to grow pioneer ministry. The vines are all of the life of pioneer ministry. The stuff that people are doing to reach those with little or no connection with church. Whether it's the spiritual add-ons, whether it's the church plant, whether it's a new expression of something within a parish or a diocese, those are the vines. But a vine without a trellis to support it is going to lie flat on the ground and get trampled. So the trellis is the organizational structure that we're trying to put in place to safeguard the vines and to help them and to enable them to grow. And that's the image that we have been working with, but it's not a new image, because the church has always been planting and putting in structures to help it grow. Our church is an ancient one. Our church has been on this island for centuries, and our church has always planted new churches. And here you see a very highly developed graphic taken from Google Maps. And this highly developed, and also a wonderful image there, obviously of Patrick himself. But right from the birth of Christianity on the island, we have planted, and there on Google Maps are all the sites of the cathedrals on our island. As from place to place, a new community of faith was planted, a new seat was established, a new leader of ministry created a new community, and then they went to the next hamlet, the next village, the next embryonic town, planted something there, put someone into ministry there, give a bit of oversight to them, went on to the next village and the next town, and so the church grew. We have always been planting. Every single church that you're a part of once didn't exist, which means that somebody had to start it at one point. Somebody had to plant it. Somebody had to pioneer it. And so we have been on this island, and we are 11 miles away from the hill that I can't pronounce, and I'm not going to try. When Rob talked about how in 1111 there was a very important time in the life of the church and the land and so on. And so we are centuries deep. The roots are deep. And we have always been trying to plant something new. But we've also 150 years old in the sense of how we are structured and how we are ordered. Because 150 years ago, close your ears, Michael and Phil and others here from the great land of England. But 150 years ago, we decided that we didn't all want to just work together anymore, and the Church of Ireland became its own autonomous church, its own governing church. But at the time when that was going to happen, people who held as high a position as Archbishop Trench, Archbishop of Dublin at the time, felt that this could be a dismal catastrophe in the life of the church. And only more wisdom from on high than we've ever shown before is going to save us from an absolute disaster. So the church at the time had to pioneer how it was going to organize itself. And it did that. 150 years ago, we pioneered a whole new constitution. We pioneered a whole new governance structure. We pioneered a whole new way to run our finances. We pioneered a whole new way to manage our properties. We pioneered principles for how we're going to work together as clergy and as laity. And so what we have now is not always what has been, because before that period of time, there was lots of different ways of doing church. But from that period of time, we have put in place a really robust framework within which to grow the Church of Ireland and to manage the Church of Ireland. And if you thought the Google map of the island was great, this is going to knock your socks off. Because here is the flow chart of the structure of the Church of Ireland. Isn't that amazing? Thank you very much. Now, those of you here from the UK, you know Peter Snow. Election night, swingometer. This is where I do my Peter Snow impersonation, okay? So we're going to start here at the left and make our way along. But the Church of Ireland is structured in such a way, this is the shape of the thing known as our Constitution. How many people go to sleep at night reading it? You will go to sleep at night if you read it. Okay, so this is the shape of the Constitution. And our Church of Ireland has two real core central bodies. There's the General Synod of the Church of Ireland that meets once a year and talks about its life and its ministry and its doctrine and its teaching and its prayer book and its laws and so on. And then it also provides cover for the representative body of the Church of Ireland that manages the properties and the finances and helps us with our charitable status and safeguarding and so on. And this is all in that one constitution. Brilliant book. You can read it for yourselves. Download it. You'll all do that right now while I'm speaking. But it's structured like this. We have the General Synod. The General Synod meets together once a year, clergy and laity from all over the diocese, all over the church. And then we are split into our 11 dioceses, all represented here. And wasn't it wonderful in the panel to hear that, people talking about pioneer ministry that was happening. I'm going to get this in the right order. Now, where did we start? We started in Connor, and then we went to Cork, and then we went to down in Dromore, and then we went to Meath and Kildare, and then we went to down Dromore again, we went to Castleferns and Ossory, and wasn't it wonderful to hear that spread of people speaking about from all over the Church of Ireland about ministry? So we meet in our diocese, and then within our diocese we have our parishes. This is the framework we know and inhabit really well. And then in the next section of chapter 4, we appoint people to parishes. This is the model that we understand. You call a board of nomination, you get a rector. The rector lives in the rectory. And that's how ministry works. And then we go into this little chapter here that nobody knows really much about, but it's just for other ministries that we're not really that sure of. They're not parish-based. And then another thing we don't know much about, chapter 6, bishops. Okay? And so we have our bishops and how they're appointed. And then we have cathedrals. And then we have our rules in terms of how we do our discipline and our canons. And then we go into the RB, and that's the section all about how we manage our properties and our monies and our safeguarding and our charitable status. And we inhabit this space sometimes without even realizing it. And if we were to pull out the space that we all inhabit the most, it's this framework between diocese and parishes and General Synod. And we put in place 150 years ago something that still holds fast now, which is basically the relationship between these three is really tight and really robust to provide a framework within which we can do ministry in the Church of Ireland. So General Synod has a standing committee that meets throughout the year. Dioceses have a diocesan synod that appoints a diocesan council. Parishes have a general vestry. It appoints a select vestry. Do you see the similarity across all three? We're set up in a way that all three are meant to sort of mirror and imitate the other. Parishes appoint people to dioceses. Dioceses organise how people get to General Synod. So we're interrelated with one another. And in every single one of these groups, we have clergy and laity working together to help run the structures of our church. That's how we're structured, that little framework. And that structure has served us so wonderfully well. It has provided a robust framework within which this church has ministered on this island for the 150 years in which it's been in place. But times change. And many of you will have seen this picture before, the Choluteca Bridge. Some of you are nodding. This is a bridge in Honduras. This bridge was built as the modern bridge to help the old bridge in the town, where the town needed a new bridge to take pressure off the old bridge in the town itself. But in the year that they built this bridge in the 90s, a hurricane hit the city. A hurricane completely moved the riverbed and destroyed the roads either side of it. And so what we've got left is a bridge with roads neither going to it or from it, and it's not serving its purpose because the river has moved. And it's a metaphor for how the world has moved. The world changes around us. Now, the church had a committee there, a while ago, and that committee produced a big report. And it produced a big report that talked about a number of things. I'm going to read some things from this report, and you might say, yeah, that sounds really relevant. So this report talked about the need for organizational renewal. And the church said, no organization needs stagnate. Every organization changes, it evolves. Every organization needs to seek to renew what it's doing. It happens in every arena of life. Those of you who don't minister, work, serve in the church know that the organizations you're in constantly evolve. But it also said, you can see there, that the church has to contend with the same obstacles that beset every institution, and they're a formidable list. Does anybody face any resistance to change if you try it? Because that's what happens. Human nature has vested interest within an organization, and so human interests prevent things from change. So the report talked about the need for organizational change. It also talked about the need for, it also noticed the changing patterns of mobility. People travel here, there, and everywhere for work or to do shopping or whatever, but to travel 3 miles down the road to the next church rather than go to this church can sometimes be like going to the moon. And we heard that actually from the video in Cashel Ferns in Ossory, where the bishop spoke about that. Or I know it wasn't the bishop, it was, help me out, who was on the video? Dean. He talked about how the community is moving now to the cathedral to create space for Ross, and how he had to do that delicately and sensitively with that community of people. It also spoke about the use of property. The buildings are the fixed plant, and they're really important, but it's not its primary importance. Having the building is not the thing. The building is a resource for the ministry of the church, and there may be times whenever we need to adapt it, we need to discard it, we need to replace it in order to serve the ministry of the church. And then it also remarkably spoke about the need to mobilize both clergy and laity in the mission of the church, and how when you're appointed to a select vestry, how many people here are on a select vestry who are not clergy? Well, if you're on a select vestry, then whenever you come on to a vestry, you would have a declaration of intent to take part in the ministry of the church. Quite a bold report. It might sound quite recent, but it was in 1967. In 1967, we were talking about organizational renewal, buildings, we were talking about laity getting involved in ministry, we were talking about mobility across parishes. But human vested interest can block change. And they make it happen very slowly. And sometimes slowly is wise, and sometimes slowly stagnates and freezes us. But just like that riverbed, our world has changed dramatically in the 60 years since 1967. Dramatically. And if the changes were needed then, well then, our world is very different now. We now live in there's a quote from Francis Schaeffer, I'll not read it out, but it's about how we live in a post-Christian world. And many of you have felt that, and you know what that looks like. I want to draw just very, very quickly on my own lived reality experience in the role that I have as the Archdeacon of Belfast. The Archdeaconry of Belfast is why I don't look my 29 years. There are sort of the historic churches in the city of Belfast. In the sort of 1830s, the 1840s and so on, we got St. Anne's, we got Christ Church, we got St. George's, we got St. Mary Magdalene and St. Matthew's. And they were part of the parish of Shankill. And that's how the church grew. And as the city grew, and towards the end of the 19th century, and just completely expanded, churches were planted all across the city. The Archdeaconry of Belfast and the Diocese of Connor is in southwest and north of the city, so Down under Moor is east of the Lagans. So the Archdeaconry that I sort of serve in, it looks like this. Another exciting Google map. I need to get these guys on the images next time. But this is the Archdeaconry of Belfast. In 2022, when I left the chaplaincy to help serve in the diocese and to work across the Archdeaconry, From the south in Finicky, for those you know it, to the north in Green Islands, about 12 miles. Within that 12-mile stretch, there were 34 ministries, 33 different registered charities, parishes, a cathedral, a chaplaincy, a church army centre of mission, all inhabiting that space. But do you remember back whenever I talked about the structures, about how we have appointments to rectors who will live in a rectory and serve in the parish? Well, if across the 30 parishes, the model of church that has served us well has been a rector, full-time, serving in a parish and living in the rectory, the red dots are where in 2022 it was palpable that that system was no longer working, it was broken. That's the number of places in which it was no longer viable to maintain the structure in the way that we have framed it for ourselves. All manner of reasons for that. The city has changed. There have been huge changes in the world around us, in industry and housing policies. That part of the city lived through the Troubles in Northern Ireland, hugely impacted. The area of the Shankill that had 100,000 people now has about 22 to 25,000 people. Huge impact. You throw in secularism, you throw in COVID, you throw in the multicultural world that we now live in, and it's had an enormous impact on how we do church. There's a great little book out there by a lady called Susan Beaumont. It's called How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going. I recommend you read it. But she writes this, she writes, "We stand on both sides of a threshold. We've one foot rooted in something that's not yet over, whereas the other foot is planted in a thing not yet defined, something not yet ready to begin. Our old structures may no longer work. Our polity, our governing board, our structures, our staffing arrangement, all suited for conditions that have evolved. Our strategic identities, though, who we are, who we serve, what we feel called to or become, were shaped by old experiences. We may no longer be served well by these outdated constructs, but we're not certain what we need next. Anybody feel like that, caught between realizing that what you're in isn't quite doing it anymore, but you're not 100% sure what you're meant to step into what it might become? Now, we're here in Meath and Kildare, and Bishop Pat's husband, Earl, as part of the leprosy mission, wrote a great report about mission and change in the life of the church a number of years ago, and he drew my attention to this quote from the Anglican Consultative Council, again almost 30 years ago now, in 1992. One of the characteristic and fundamental missionary tasks of the church is to examine and review its structures. Is the way we're doing things still the best way to do mission? Not to review its structures so that we have great structures, but so that they're great to help us do mission. When Archbishop Richard Clarke gave his inaugural speech, if you can move that on, I think I've paused this. No, I've got it. Whenever he spoke to General Synod in Armagh, I think it was in 2013, it was his first year, he spoke about the difference between the church as an organisation and an organism. When an organisation comes to an end, we think it's failed. When a living organism comes to its end, it's part of a natural life cycle. Things are allowed to die gracefully and to die well. But the fundamental characteristic of the relationship between the organisation and the organism is that the shape of the organisation should help the organism to be a delivery point for the gospel, to receive and to give the gospel. And he spoke about the need to sort of bring with, at the same time, new ways of doing things without discarding the old ways of doing things until we discern what's going to work, but to allow both to happen. And over the last decade or so, pioneer ministry has begun to find its place within the shape of the life of our church. And so many of you will have seen the video, you'll have been to the seminars before, you've seen what Rob's been doing when he's been going around dioceses. The way that we have tried to create a trestle for the vine is to frame it around 5 key areas. One, there is now a Pioneer Ministry Council that will report every single year to General Synod. It has people from all across the Church of Ireland sitting on it. There's a Pioneer Leadership Team of which Rob and Phil and myself have the privilege of playing a part, along with Abby, who's our new administrator, and we really welcome Abby onto the team. So we try to put in place a leadership framework. We've also wanted to create pioneer ministry hubs. And many of you here are part of hubs all across this island. And later on we'll hear from advocates, those who are leading those hubs. We have sought to create a pathway to identify and train and support and deploy full-time pioneers. And we heard from 6 of them here this afternoon. We hope that the product of that will be multiple new communities of faith, expressions of church, that are led by many volunteers in unfunded places across the church, and that are also sometimes, when the need arises, crystallize into potentially being a full-time pioneer role. And we want that to be well recognized and resourced by the wider church. And the church is recognizing and has resourced significantly funding for pioneer ministry, and for that we are truly, truly thankful. And we are seeking to make sure that those who are going into pioneer ministry are properly recognized and supported. So what does this look like now in that wonderfully exciting map here of the Constitution of the Church of Ireland? Well, do you remember that little space that I said we weren't really quite sure what to do with it? Chapter 5. Things that aren't parishes. Well, into chapter 5, we've located what looks like a very small little box. And that small little box gives legal permission for pioneer ministries to exist within the Church of Ireland. And that small little box says pioneer ministers can be licensed as pioneer ministers within the Church of Ireland. But the vision isn't that we just become another little box on a flowchart. The vision is that what we want to see happen is this. Is that through Pioneer, what starts to happen is we start to influence General Synod, we start to influence dioceses, we start to change local parishes, we start to encourage and embolden bishops in their oversight of the mission of the church, that there'll be pioneer ministries happening out of cathedrals, that we'll have to figure out what to do with our laws and our rules because we're trying to accommodate different expressions of church, that we'll have to open up the finances and the buildings and so on and make sure that they provide and resource pioneer ministry, that we'll have to make sure that pioneer ministries can be properly have the right charitable status and be properly safeguarded. So the vision is that this top-down flow will grow up and will change and help transform and renew our church. And it's so exciting to be part of this all-island thing here today, with all the different voices, and to see this beginning to happen. The update is that at this moment in time, we have pioneers in full-time roles. There's 9 of them at present. There's 14 who are currently being trained. God willing, there will be 5 new pioneers starting in September of next year. We have hubs in every part of the Church of Ireland. We have diocesan advocates leading those hubs, and you've heard from and will continue to hear from them. Last year, we did all of this without mentioning full-time pioneers and funding, so we simply want to close by giving you information as to what that means. And it's all in your guidebook. It's in that blue bag that you've been given. So it's all in there and it's all online. But in a nutshell, just so we kind of know what it might look like, a full-time pioneer ministry, in order to get traction, has to be unequivocally about 4 things. It has to be missional. It's about reaching those with little or no connection with church. It has to be formational. We're not just trying to run events and draw crowds. We're trying to grow disciples and followers of Jesus Christ. It has to be contextual. It will look different in every context, and you've already heard something of that before. And it will be ecclesial. A new community of faith will be formed. A new community of faith will be formed. There's a very complex grid, which I won't spend a lot of time on, but there is a timeline in that guidebook that shows how, if you're interested in bringing forward a proposal for a pioneer ministry, roughly up until around sort of the February of next year, if we think about 2026 as a live example, you can be thinking about that conceptually now, but by the end of March next year, it needs to be a well-developed proposal, properly costed, showing how it's going to be missional, formational, contextual, and ecclesial. If you're a person who's interested in pioneering and you're talking to your bishop, you're talking to your rector, you're talking to someone in the diocese about that, you're talking to the advocate or hub, discerning that call, at some point in February or March next year, that will crystallize in an actual selection process. a formal one. And then we will get into March, and one of the key jobs of the Pioneer Ministry Council every year is to review the applications that are brought forward and to say these are the applications that we are submitting to the final approval process so the funding can be released. That's the process for both the person and the place. And then in September 2026, what will happen is the ministry will begin, and the person who's beginning the ministry will start the training course alongside working in the Pioneer Ministry. The training course will run for 3 years out of the 5, and presumably around the 3-year point, there will be a real intentional review. What is going to happen 2 years from now, whenever the funding cycle comes to an end? What is the succession plan in all of this? And after the 5 years, it really is, well, what happens next? Where do we go next? What does that funding look like in real terms? Well, for anything starting in 2026, it means a central grant from the Church of Ireland of roughly around €141,000 or 122,000 sterling. That's paid over 5 years, and it's deliberately shaped to step down so that the Pioneer Ministry becomes less reliant on the grant as you approach the end of the funding period. And then if you're receiving that, and some of you already are, that's paid in 3 instalments each year. For those in training, the 3-year training is a course that's run with Church Army and Church of Ireland Theological Institute. It's 6 residentials, weekend residentials, or some of them during the week, in the year. 4 of them in England with Church Army, 2 of them here based in CITI with Church Army and CITI. And it's a 3-year course that leads to the certificate in Pioneer Ministry. The key is, folks, it's not just about getting funding for a little project we can do. Is this really going to reach the unchurched? Is this really, really going to grow disciples? Is this going to look like something that relates to the world that I'm in? And is there going to be a real intentionality to form a new expression of church? Wake up. Now you understand Pioneer Ministry within church structures. Yes, now you've seen some amazing graphics. You've been startled beyond belief. You can talk to me afterwards about how to make all of those wonderful images come together. That's my clear area of expertise. I hope that has been of interest to you. I hope it has been both repetitive and tedious. But I do hope that what it does is it gives us confidence that as a church, we are seeking to make sure that we grow this well, we grow this wisely, and the Pioneer Ministry is the Church of Ireland. It's not just something the Church of Ireland does. So God bless, and thanks for listening.